Our story begins with Takuma, an ordinary shut-in who stays at home all day playing online games and watching anime recaps. But in the online world of cross-reverie, he is known as Diablo, the Demon Lord, and the strongest player to have ever touched the game. But on one particular day, Takuma mysteriously awakens in an alternate universe as Diablo, his Demon Lord character, after being summoned by two girls who each plant a kiss on him as part of the summoning ritual. However, due to his special ring that deflects all magical spells, the two girls are enslaved to Takuma rather than the other way around. Realizing that he was somehow brought into the world of his favorite online game, he decides to adopt the persona of his character and begins to act like a Chad Demon Lord, to hide the fact that he's secretly a shy nerd who spent most of his life alone and has never really interacted with people outside of online games. After some bickering, the two girls decide to introduce themselves to their new owner. The elf with the great personality gleefully introduces herself as Shera, meanwhile the cat girl reluctantly introduces herself as Rem. And Diablo, not wanting to reveal himself as a socially inept shut-in, introduces himself as the almighty Demon Lord, which greatly excites Shera as she's never heard of someone summoning a Demon Lord before. When they arrive in town, the trio check in at an inn, but Diablo is overwhelmed by being in what he considers to be a large crowd. He's even more nervous when he finds out that the three of them have to share a room with a single bed due to having no money. This awkward situation is soon interrupted by Celestine, the head of the Mage Association, who wishes to talk with Rem. Diablo is shocked by this as he recognizes Celestine as a prominent figure in the cross-reverie game. That night at the inn's cafeteria, Diablo aggressively urges Celestine to hurry up and get to the point, which causes Galak, one of Celestine's followers, to tell Diablo to watch his tone. And although Diablo is internally frightened by Galak, he decides to double down on his Demon Lord persona and threatens Galak to watch his mouth. Celestine and Rem then have a brief conversation together before Celestine leaves with her followers. Suspecting that Rem is keeping secrets, Diablo decides to get the truth out of her by force, while Shera pretends not to see anything and just keeps eating. Once in their room, Diablo tortures Rem in a light and innocent manner until she's had enough and finally confesses her secret to him. It turns out that the Demon Lord, Krebscomb, was sealed inside her body at birth, and Celestine is the only other person who knows. They have been working on a way to extract and slay Krebscomb without killing Rem, but haven't found a way to do that yet. Upon hearing this, Diablo vows to help her find a solution too, which brings Rem to tears, as she's never had anyone willing to fight for her before. Diablo attempts to console her by putting his arm around her, but he's too socially inept and decides against it after all. Later that night, while taking a stroll through town, Diablo is confronted by Galak, who wishes to make Diablo pay for embarrassing him in front of Celestine. Galak throws his Pokeball on the ground and summons a level 30 salamander. Diablo is impressed by the size and stature of the beast, but he's severely underwhelmed by how low level it is. Galak then orders his beast to breathe fire upon Diablo, but this has no effect on him as he is level 150 and he simply walks through it completely unscathed. As he blasts the salamander away with a fire spell of his own, Diablo reminds Galak never to expect mercy from a Demon Lord. The next day, Diablo wakes up in bed next to his enslaved companions and accidentally grabs both of them. And although he wants to stop, he simply can't, as he seems to be unable to move his hands away from their divine cushions. Both girls soon wake up shocked and embarrassed, which leads Rem to have a sour mood for the rest of the day, but Shera doesn't seem too bothered by it. Later on, the trio decide to join the Adventurers Guild and take on quests, but when they try to measure Diablo's level, the power measuring device malfunctions and dark energy begins to spread throughout the city. This attracts the attention of Sylvie, the guild master, who asks the trio to come into her office. Once there, Sylvie explains that due to Diablo's immeasurably high level, there aren't any job requests he can take. However, Diablo is willing to work regardless, as he only cares for the rewards. With that in mind, Sylvie sends the trio on their first quest, to slay a powerful snake from the man-eating woods. When they finally reach the woods, they are ambushed by a squad of elves who believe that Diablo is a slave trader who's enslaved Shera, the princess of the royal elven kingdom. They then raise their bows and aim their arrows at Diablo, before proclaiming that they're here to rescue Shera and bring her back home. Shera, however, refuses to return home, because her brother has been pressuring her to marry him and bear his child, which she refuses to do. The elves then attack Diablo with a powerful Tempest arrow, but unfortunately for them, this has no effect on Diablo, who simply blocks the attack by standing still. He then casts a powerful spell which freezes the surrounding area, turning the forest completely into ice. Out of nowhere, Galak reveals himself and begins to berate the elves for being useless. It's then that Diablo realizes that Galak had made a fake quest to lure him there and ambush him, but failed miserably. In response, he threatens Galak to never show his face around him ever again. Once back in town, while Rem reports back to Celestine about Galac's betrayal, Shera clings to Diablo and begs him to let her become his master as she believes she's responsible for summoning him. Embarrassed, Diablo tries to push her off, but accidentally feels her melons instead, which embarrasses him even further. Shera surprisingly doesn't stop him, but their time together is cut short when a furious Rem interrupts their fun. The next day, Diablo and Shera are given a quest by Celestine to deliver refreshments to the guards at the Bridge of Ulag. Rem decides to sit this quest out however, as she doesn't want to do work for Celestine. As the trio leave the Adventurers Guild, they are stopped by Emile, a self-proclaimed level 50 superhuman who fights for the honor of all women. Believing that Shera and Rem are being forcibly enslaved by Diablo, he challenges the Demon Lord to a duel and promises to free the enslaved maidens. Diablo, on the other hand, is just excited to finally meet the legendary hero destined to slay the Demon Lord. But when their duel begins, Emile turns out to be far too weak to even scratch Diablo. Feeling as though he has no other choice, Emile begins charging up a powerful attack, but Diablo simply knocks him out before he can finish. Diablo and Shera then continue on their quest, and soon reach the Bridge of Ulag, where one of the guards recognizes Diablo as the horned demon everyone has been talking about around town. He informs them that they've received a report that a massive army of Fallen is approaching the bridge. Knowing that the guards will not survive without his help, Diablo volunteers to defend the bridge. The Fallen army soon arrives, and although they try to intimidate Diablo, he makes quick work of them and eliminates them one by one. Meanwhile, in the city, Celestine reveals to Rem that she has fired Galac due to his actions. Just then, a hysterical Galac enters with his hands all bloody and demands to hear from Celestine that he wasn't actually fired from the Mages Association. The situation quickly escalates, and Galac suddenly stabs himself with a cursed dagger, causing his body to be possessed and transform into a Fallen named Gregor. Back at the bridge, Diablo continues to annihilate the Fallen invaders, until Edelgard, the commander of the Fallen, decides to fight Diablo on her own. And although she is strong, she is still no match for Diablo, who effortlessly avoids all her attacks. Meanwhile, Gregor pursues Celestine and Rem as they escape the inn. But when they are cornered with nowhere else to run, Emile and several adventurers arrive to defend them. Emile tries valiantly to defend the girls, but Gregor proves much too strong for him. Despite this, Emile refuses to yield and promises to protect all women with his life. Back at the bridge, Diablo tries to convince Edelgard to just give up, as he hopes to end the battle without spending too much mana. Despite being unable to significantly harm Diablo, Edelgard refuses to give up. She then charges up a powerful attack and lunges at him, who simply takes the blow head-on, without even trying to dodge it. The small crowd of onlookers are amazed by Diablo's unbelievable strength, and Edelgard herself is having a hard time believing it. Diablo asks her to give up once more, but when a messenger reveals to him that Rem is in trouble, he decides to get serious and casts his seemingly weak White Nova spell onto the bridge. This insanely powerful spell completely eviscerates the surrounding area and most of the bridge, but to Diablo's amazement, Edelgard survived the blast. With no time to waste on her, however, Diablo teleports himself and Shera back to town, and arrives just in time to save Emile from certain death. Vengeful for all the people Gregor hurt and killed, Diablo completely overpowers Gregor and makes him beg for mercy, but Diablo shows him none. He then finishes Gregor off by trapping him in an eternal abyss of pain and suffering. Once the fight is over, Shera tearfully embraces Diablo, while Rem grabs his hand and thanks him for saving her. Trying to remain in character, Diablo claims that the only reason he helped Rem was because she belongs to him, and to his surprise, Rem doesn't dispute this. Diablo then collapses from exhaustion and face plants onto Rem's chest, but she unfortunately does not have any cushions to stop the fall. Afterwards, funerals are held for the people killed in Gregor's attack, and Diablo comes to understand that this world is different from the game world he's familiar with, because people who die here can never come back to life. 10 days later, while Diablo is still recovering his mana, and the girls are still bickering over him, Guildmaster Sylvie enters their room to inform them that they were warned by the Royal Elven Kingdom to hand over Shera within 10 days, or else a war will be waged. Sylvie goes on to explain that Kira, Shera's brother, put a huge bounty on Shera's head. Upon hearing this, Diablo becomes furious and agrees to help Shera out. The group then meets Chester, the lord of the city, who asks them to do their best to prevent a war, since Shera refuses to return to the Elven Kingdom. Chester then assigns Alicia, an Imperial Knight, to assist them on this mission. That night, while chilling together at the inn, Kira arrives and apologizes for the bounty he placed on his sister's head. He then tries to persuade Shera to return with him, but she reiterates that she will not return. When Diablo steps in and intimidates Kira, he decides to leave, but promises that Shera will soon return to him of her own free will. Later on, as Shera and Rem have a heart-to-heart while staring at the moon, Kira is seen playing a flute while staring at the same moon and laughs maniacally. That night, Diablo has a nightmare of his childhood, where his so-called friends were just using him for stronger equipment in a game, and then abandoned him. Later that day, while Rem and Alicia are busy, Diablo spends the day making potions alone with Shera. Suddenly, the sound of a flute is heard, and Shera becomes in a trance-like state. She tells Diablo that she wants to return home, and immediately begins walking away. She then climbs into Kira's wagon and leaves with him. Depressed about being abandoned again, Diablo mopes around all day, but Rem and Alicia eventually deduce that Shera was hypnotized, and the group begins to plan a way to rescue her. Meanwhile, Kira chains Shera up in his tent and interrogates her about her relationship with Diablo, but refuses to believe her when she says that Diablo did not do anything indecent to her. Suddenly, a giant explosion occurs outside, and Diablo arrives just in time to save Shera before Kira could do anything to her. They free Shera from her shackles, but Kira uses the flute to hypnotize her again and make her lie that she wants to stay with him. Diablo, however, uses his authority as the master of her collar to make her tell the truth, and a tearful Shera reveals that she wants to stay with Diablo and Rem. Diablo then plans to execute Kira, but Shera asks him to spare him, as he is still her brother. Diablo agrees, but Chester appears out of nowhere and beheads Kira himself. Chester then has his army round up the already beaten up elf troops and attempts to capture Shera. It turns out that Chester was secretly planning to conquer the Elven Kingdom all along, and this is his best opportunity to do so. Chester traps Diablo in an energy sphere and effortlessly destroys Alicia's sword when she tries to defend Shera. Witnessing this astonishes Diablo, as Chester's movements surpass human limits, making him at least level 100 or above. Diablo breaks free from his confinement and faces off against Chester. Surprisingly, both men are pretty evenly matched, and Chester proves himself to be an exceptional swordsman. When he has Diablo right where he wants him, Chester attempts to finish him off, but Diablo casts a lightning bullet spell before he can, defeating Chester and narrowly winning the fight. Afterwards, Alicia threatens to report Chester's unethical actions to the king, so he surrenders and withdraws his troops. The group then heal the elf troops with potions and comfort Shera over the loss of her brother. Once back at the inn, Sylvie serves an exhausted Diablo a drink meant to restore his mana, but he becomes drunk instead and mistakes her for a body pillow from his past life, which embarrasses her greatly. The next day, Alicia runs into Sadler, an arrogant paladin, who tells her that he's heading to town to investigate Diablo, as he's heard rumors that the Demon Lord is being revived. Meanwhile, in the outskirts of the city, Diablo and Rem help Shera improve her archery skills. After this, Shera claims that Rem has a funky smell, which leads to her suggesting they all take a bath together. At a local river stream, Shera and Rem bathe together while Diablo is too flustered to join them. Suddenly, Edelgard arrives at the scene and grabs a hold of Rem, while reassuring them that she's not there to fight, but simply to see if Rem truly holds the Demon Lord Krebskulm within her. Edelgard then explains that in 3 days, a ritual can be performed at Starfall Tower, which can remove Krebskulm from Rem without harming her. After talking it through, the group decides to go along with Edelgard's plan. But Diablo is unsure how he'll deal with Krebskulm once it's released. 3 days later, Alicia returns to town and warns the group about Sadler, who she says is rumored to be as strong or even stronger than Chester. Despite their efforts to try and avoid a confrontation with Sadler, the group runs into him and his subordinates. Sadler condemns Diablo's friends for consorting with a demon lord, and tries to cast Diablo to stone with magic. But Diablo reflects the spell, and Sadler is the one turned to stone instead. With him out of the way, the group heads to Starfall Tower to remove Krebskulm from within Rem. Once there, Edelgard explains that, in order to release Krebskulm, Diablo must pour his magical energy into Rem. Despite his embarrassment, he goes through with it and manages to reach Krebskulm's seal and break it. At first, what emerges is a towering, hideous demon, but then it transforms into a cute little girl. On top of that, Krebskulm has amnesia and doesn't remember how to use her Demon Lord powers. Shera then decides to feed her some cookies, and Krebskulm becomes completely enamored with the taste, which leads to her deciding not to wipe out all mortals after all. Alicia protests this decision, but Edelgard on the other hand is loyal to Krebskulm and accepts it. The group then decides to change Krebskulm's name to Clem in order to avoid a panic, and return back to town. Meanwhile, in Alicia's room, she reflects on the harsh life she's had to live, and her horrible upbringing, and calmly states her resolve to follow the Demon Lord's creed, to eliminate the mortal races. Elsewhere, Sadler is shown to be freed from his petrification. The next day, the group tells Celestine about Clem, and she is relieved that the Demon Lord is not evil after all. Later on, while separated from Shera and Diablo, Alicia betrays Rem and Clem and brings them to Sadler, who arrests them. Alicia's true plan, however, is to traumatize Clem until she returns to her demon lord form. Sadler then takes them to a church, where he intends to torture Rem until she confesses to worshipping a demon lord, while Diablo and Shera search all over town for them. To make matters worse, a massive army of Fallen is revealed to be marching towards the city. Back at the church, Clem tries to protect Rem, but when Sadler attempts to strike her, Rem shields her with her body and is impaled several times. This causes Clem to snap, and she returns to her original demon lord form as she fills with rage. She proceeds to kill Sadler and blows up the church. Diablo and Shera arrive too late and find a deceased Rem. Diablo gives Shera every potion he has and tasks her with healing Rem, while he plans to take on Clem. Outside the city, Edelgard, along with a massive army of Fallen, relish the fact that Krebsholm has finally fully resurrected. Alicia soon joins them, and is revealed to be the mastermind behind the entire plot to fully resurrect the Demon Lord. Meanwhile, Shera treats Rem's injuries with potions, and Diablo manages to dodge Krebsholm's attacks while laying down trap spells. As Rem slowly begins to regain consciousness, Emil arrives and protects the girls from debris. With his traps all placed, Diablo casts a powerful spell that, despite greatly damaging Krebsholm, is still not enough to destroy her. However, when Krebsholm sees that Rem is unharmed, her shell breaks and she reverts back to Clem. Emil is surprised to see this, but he reassures Diablo that he won't say anything, as he is an ally to all women. Outside of the city, the Fallen army turns on Alicia for her failed attempt at resurrecting the Demon Lord. But Edelgard sacrifices herself, allowing Alicia time to escape. Eventually, Sylvie meets up with Diablo and friends and thanks them for their efforts in stopping the Demon Lord, but deduces that Clem is actually Krebsholm. She explains that Clem is far too dangerous to be allowed to live, which leads Diablo to enslave Clem in order to guarantee that she can't turn against them again, and seals the ritual with a kiss. The next day, Shera and Rem ask Diablo to choose one of them to kiss, as they find it unfair that he kissed Clem, but not them. However, Diablo refuses because he is a Chad Demon Lord who does what he wants, and not at all because he is too awkward to kiss them. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all again in the next one.